I refused to sleep in my bedroom for years. The one night I gave in, something knocked back. I never liked my bedroom, and no matter how many times I've tried to explain that to people, the words always sound smaller than the feeling itself. It wasn't fear in the usual sense. I wasn't scared of shadows or monsters or what might be hiding under the bed. It was something quieter than that, something that settled into my bones and stayed there. From the time I was a teenager, the room felt wrong. The moment I stepped inside, the air seemed thicker, as if it resisted being breathed. Silence in that room wasn't empty. It pressed back, heavy and observant. I would stand in the doorway sometimes, hand still on the light switch, just listening, waiting for the feeling to pass. It never did. My dad used to joke that I was too sensitive, and maybe he was right. I've always noticed things other people shrug off, the way a space can hold memories, the way certain rooms feel warmer or colder without reason. But my bedroom wasn't just uncomfortable, it felt aware, like it noticed when I noticed it. That's why I started trading rooms with my dad. He would take my bedroom, and I'd sleep in my parents' room beside my mom. To everyone else, it probably looked childish, even embarrassing. A teenager who didn't want to sleep alone. But the truth was simpler and harder to explain. My parents' room felt safe. It breathed normally. The walls didn't listen. When my dad slept in my room, nothing happened to him. That almost made it worse. It was as if the room didn't care about him, as if whatever lingered there wasn't interested, like it was waiting for me specifically. When I'd walk past the closed door in the morning, I could still feel it behind the wood, quiet and patient, like an eye open in the dark. Over time, I learned how to avoid it. I turned my bedroom into a place I passed through instead of stayed in. I'd grab clothes, charge my phone, then leave as quickly as possible. I never sat on the bed longer than necessary. I never lay down in the dark. The room became storage, not shelter. The house itself was old, and everyone blamed that. Old houses settle, old houses creak, old houses have moods. I wanted to believe that explanation more than anyone. I told myself I was projecting, that I'd built this feeling over years and couldn't let it go. But deep down, I knew the difference between imagination and instinct. My body reacted before my thoughts could catch up. Tight chest, shallow breaths, the urge to leave immediately. What bothered me most was the sense of waiting. The room didn't threaten me. It didn't chase me out. It simply existed, unchanged, like it had all the time in the world. Every time I avoided sleeping there, it felt less like relief and more like a temporary truce. Years passed, and I almost convinced myself I'd outgrown it. Almost. But whenever I stood alone in that room, lights on, door open, I'd still feel it, that subtle pressure, like a held breath. It wasn't empty. It never had been. And part of me wondered if the only reason nothing had ever happened was because I refused to stay long enough for it to begin. The house didn't change all at once. It never does. It happened quietly, in small ways that were easy to dismiss until they weren't. When my dad left to work overseas, the house felt bigger, like it had inhaled and decided not to exhale. His absence created spaces where sound used to be. Doors closed more softly, footsteps echoed longer. At first, I told myself that was just loneliness filling the rooms. Then, my mom started having nightmares. They weren't the kind you shake off after a glass of water. She'd wake up gasping, clutching her chest, eyes wide but unfocused, as if she'd run a long way in her sleep. When I asked her what she dreamed about, she'd hesitate, then say she couldn't remember, or that it was nothing, but her hands trembled when she said it. Night after night, it kept happening. Sometimes I'd hear her call my name before she was fully awake. Other times, I'd find her sitting upright in bed, staring at the doorway, her face pale in the low light. Once she whispered that she felt like someone had been standing too close to her, watching her breathe. She laughed it off afterwards, but I didn't miss the fear behind it. That's when she asked me to sleep upstairs. The request landed heavier than she realized. My bedroom, that room, had been untouched for years. I hadn't slept there since I was younger, and even then, only with the lights on or the door open. I felt a familiar knot tighten in my stomach just thinking about it. She said she didn't want to be alone, not at night. I didn't want to leave her. That mattered more than my fear, so I agreed, telling myself that things change, that maybe whatever had once unsettled me was gone, or maybe had never been real to begin with. The first night, nothing happened. That almost made it worse. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the familiar sounds of the house settling around me. The room smelled the same, the walls looked the same, but the feeling I remembered hadn't faded. If anything, it felt more focused, like attention narrowing. By the second night, my sleep came in fragments. I kept waking up for no reason, heart racing, as though I'd heard something just before my eyes opened. Each time, the room was still, too still. On the third night, I noticed the time. Every time I woke up, the digital clock glowed the same number back at me. 1 a.m. Not 12:58, not 1:02, exactly 1. I told myself it was coincidence. I refused to let my thoughts spiral. But at 12:59, the air in the room changed. It felt heavier, charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. My ears rang softly, and the silence deepened until it felt like pressure against my skin. I remember holding my breath without realizing it, waiting for something, anything, to explain the shift. I thought of my mom downstairs, sleeping fitfully. I told myself I was being strong for her, that fear only wins if you give it permission. Then the house responded, and for the first time in my life, the room didn't just feel like it was waiting. It felt like it had noticed I'd finally stayed. I was still awake when it started. That's the detail that haunts me the most. I hadn't drifted off, hadn't been half dreaming, hadn't been caught in that foggy space where your mind fills in gaps. I was wide awake, staring at the faint outline of my door, listening to the low hum of the house as it settled into the early hours of morning. At exactly 1 p.m., the silence changed. It wasn't broken, it shifted, like the room leaned closer. The air felt heavier, harder to pull into my lungs, and my skin prickled as if I'd stepped into a cold draft that didn't exist. My chest tightened instinctively before my thoughts could catch up. Tight chest, shallow breaths, the urge to leave immediately. Then came the first knock. Not sharp, not quick, heavy. It sounded like something large pressing its weight into the door, testing it. The wood didn't rattle, it absorbed the impact, dull and deep, the way it would if a solid palm hit it flat. I sat up in bed, heart pounding so loudly I was sure it would drown out everything else. The second knock came slower, deliberate. Each one landed with intention, spaced just far enough apart that I couldn't convince myself it was random. This wasn't something brushing past. This wasn't the house settling. It felt measured, thoughtful. And then I heard the growl. It came from the other side of the door, low and vibrating, like it started in a chest too large to be human. The sound crawled along the floorboards and up the walls, resonating through the room until I could feel it in my teeth. It wasn't loud, but it was close, horribly close. My first thought was impossible. My second was worse. We were on the second floor. There was no balcony outside my bedroom, no ladder, no tree close enough to reach the window. Every window was locked. I knew that because I had checked twice before lying down. Every door in the house was deadbolted. There was nothing, no one, that could be standing there. The knocking came again, harder this time. The door flexed inward just enough for me to see the shadow beneath it shift, as if something on the other side had leaned closer. The growl deepened, vibrating through the wood, through the frame, through me. I didn't scream. I couldn't. Fear locked my throat shut, turned my body heavy and slow. All I could think was, don't open it, not because I was afraid of what I'd see, but because I knew with absolute certainty that whatever was there didn't need the door to stay closed for long. I ran. I don't remember my feet hitting the floor, only the sound of my own breathing, ragged and too loud, as I tore down the hallway towards my mom's room. The knocking followed me, not moving, not chasing, just continuing, steady and patient, like it knew exactly where I was going. My mom was already awake when I burst in. She heard it too. We locked the door and huddled together on the bed, hands